Welcome to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. I'm your host, Craig Zolan. Today's guest is Dr. Jim Taylor, who's a leading authority on the psychology of ski racing. In his early life, Jim competed internationally while racing for Burke Mountain Academy, Middlebury College, and the University of Colorado. Jim has worked with many World Cup racers and most of the leading junior race programs in North America. Jim is also the author of 18 books, including his latest mental training book, Train Your Mind for Athletic Success, Mental Preparation to Achieve Your Sports Goals. In addition, Jim is the developer of the Prime ski racing online courses for racers, coaches, and parents. We talk about the importance of mental training and what you can be doing now in the offseason to prepare yourself come wintertime. Now, let's go rip some fresh corduroy with Dr. Jim Taylor. All right, welcome to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. Today's guest is Dr. Jim Taylor. Jim, welcome to Fresh Corduroy.
Great to be here with you. I'm looking forward to talking about something we both love, which is skiing.
Yes, I think that's the rule of the day, which is we're both very passionate skiers and love talking about it. And so let's start right off the bat with that. What is the Jim Taylor skiing origin story?
Yes, well, it's a very long one, and it's a good one, I think. My parents met in New York City, in Brooklyn, and they became skiers in their early 20s. And so when I was born and my sister was born, we started skiing pretty much as soon as we could stand. And I grew up outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and for some reason my parents chose Mad River Glen, ski it if you can, as the place that would be our home. And we ended up building a house there, an A-frame, quite relatively famous because it's right across from the base lodge and in the parking lot. And so I grew up skiing there when I was about 2.5 or something like that. Got into the Chipmunk racing program when I was 6. And then started skiing, racing USSA, I think when I was 9. Went to Burke Mountain Academy because I wanted to be the best ski racer in the world. However unlikely that was. And then from Burke, I had a reasonably accomplished ski racing career. Competed against the best in the world. My motto is, I competed against the best in the world, but they weren't worried about me. Anyway, made the bottom of the U.S. ski team, made it farther than anybody expected me to, including myself. Had an amazing time at Burke. Then went to Middlebury, skied for them for 3 years, and then went out to do my graduate work in psychology at the University of Colorado. And while there, I had 1 more year of eligibility left, so I raced for CU and we won a national championship, which was something we couldn't do at Middlebury because we didn't have scholarship athletes. And raced on the pro ski tour for a couple of years. And then it was time to finish my graduate degree, finish my doctorate, so I hung up my ski racing boards and have skied regularly since. My daughters were ski racers. We have a house near Sugar Bowl above Truckee, and ski there a lot. I still work extensively in the ski racing world with pretty much every junior program around the country, many U.S. ski team athletes, World Cuppers from other sports, World Cuppers from other teams, other countries. And, it's been a lifelong passion and a joy. And there are 2 things that bring me joy now as far as skiing goes. One is arcing turns, and the second is skiing with my daughters.
I love both of those things too, and try and get as much of both as possible, although arcing turns by myself is more plentiful than skiing with my son these days. But hopefully he'll come around at some point. Let's talk about your interest in psychology of sport, and where did that develop? Did you know as an early racer that, the mental side of the sport was my thing, or was that later in life?
Yeah, no. Very much early in life. There's a cliche that people become psychologists to figure themselves out. Well, that was how I got into my work in the mental side of ski racing. I was basically known as a head case at Burke, or a mind job, where my mind got in the way of my ski racing. where I was a good skier, went up pretty fast. At one point, I was like, before I discovered the mental side of ski racing, I was maybe 40th in the nation. I think I was 17 or so, but my head always got in the way. I couldn't focus, had no confidence, got really nervous. And they didn't really seem to have sports psychologists back then. So one summer I took a summer college course near where I grew up, and it introduced me to a lot of the techniques and tools that I use with the athletes that I work with now. Things like imagery, goal setting, routines, self-talk. And I applied those tools to my ski racing through the summer after I was 17 and on into the next season. And I took a quantum leap in my ski racing. And it wasn't because I got better technically. It wasn't because I got bigger and stronger. I attribute it entirely to using these mental tools. The most powerful one was imagery, which is basically closing your eyes and seeing and feeling yourself skiing the way you want. And we can probably talk about that in more detail in a little bit. And then so when I got to Middlebury freshman year, I took Psych 101. And the way I put it is that I didn't choose psychology, it chose me. I mean, I could have gone to business, law school, medical school, whatever, but there was no question. This is what I wanted to do. And Craig, there's a saying, Mark Twain said, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel that way. I've been doing this a long time, and every day I can't wait to get up and help people and write and create and share.
That's terrific. And do you use the experiences of being a ski racer and growing up as a ski racer in how you approach, coaching the mental side of the game today?
Oh, absolutely. At several levels. First of all, it gives me credibility. So right now, my practice is probably about 60% ski racers because I'm sort of like the guy, and I don't mean that in an ego way. There just aren't that many people who specialize it and have the background. Mm-hmm. And so they come to me, racers can go, he gets it. Because ski racing is a pretty weird sport. Skiing is a weird sport. It's like you put sticks on your feet and you put sticks in your hands and you go down a hill. What's up with that? And so having an understanding, I think, not only creates that credibility that I know what it's like, but also I understand what it's like to be in the starting gate at the top of a national championship or a Europa Cup. I never skied World Cups, and to really understand like what these athletes are experiencing. And so it also helps me I can talk the talk. I can share my own experiences and my struggles and my challenges. So it's an integral part of my work for sure.
And you said 40% are ski racers, and I understand that another large chunk might be tennis players. I don't know if it's the seasonality of it, but I guess does the lessons that you coach and teach apply to a variety of different sports, inclusive of, say, snowboarding? I can think of, obviously, whether it's a competitive freestyle athlete who's, again, in a start gate to go down a mogul run or to drop into a pipe or to, take a run through the park with all sorts of tricks. At the end of the day, they're all facing a type of pressure that one experiences when you're in the starting gate of a ski race.
Absolutely. And it's not just ski racing psychology. It's not skiing psychology. It's not snow sports psychology. It's life. So, I work with fencers, squash players. I do a lot of work in triathlon because that's my latest passion. And I work in the business world. I've worked with surgeons, dancers, the military. Performance is performance. And getting more specific to snow sports, that it doesn't matter whether you're standing on top of the Hahnenkamm, or you're standing on top of a super pipe, or you're just a regular skier standing on top of KT22 or the chute or the goat or whatever your challenge is. There's very little difference between a free ski run on a steep, bumpy slope and a race run on a slalom course. They both have a start. They both have terrain, snow conditions, weather, and obstacles. In the case of ski racing, in the case of or snowboarding, giant slalom, there's the gates. For half pipe, it's the pipe. For just regular skiers, it's the bumps and the snow conditions. So all the same things apply for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, putting aside the competitive athletes, How does the recreational skier, snowboarder utilize, and maybe we'll get into specifics later, but again, presumably the recreational weekend warrior skier, snowboarder can utilize the same techniques to allow them to advance in their technique and allow them to tackle terrain, whether it's a steep mogul run or a glade or whatever the case may be, a cliff, for the first time, or to improve out on it. Correct?
Oh, without a doubt. And the main thing about skiing is that it is incredibly psychological. And I think part of the reason people ski is because they like being challenged. They like going from a green to a blue to a black to a double black and so on. And often, yes, they need to learn technique. They need to get comfortable with that. But that's not enough. And so, as an example, for a number of years earlier in my career, I worked with ski schools around the country. Everything from Killington to Aspen to Vail to Steamboat to Park City, a bunch of others. And they weren't teaching ski racing. They were teaching skiing. Because the acquisition of skills, it takes focus, it takes understanding. Obviously, ski pros, ski instructors, they are intuitive psychologists. The best coaches, the best instructors are really good at psychology, because to get somebody to ski down a trail that they've never skied before, that's scary. And if you think that the guys at the top of Aspen World Cup or Birds of Prey, you don't think they have some of those kind of concerns? They're human, and so they do too. So I don't care if you're Shaun White, you're still going to feel something at the top of a major snow sport challenge. And so I think a lot of it plays into what are some of the key, what I call mental muscles that you have to strengthen, and then what are some tools you can use, either to prepare for it or when you're at the top and it's like that. And I've been skiing for a long time, and I consider myself a pretty darn good skier, and yet if I'm skiing something challenging, I have the same thing.
Yeah. I am the same way. I've just had the opportunity to ski some amazing terrain this past winter, out in Revelstoke and Kicking Horse. Terrain that you look over the edge and you're like, wow, that's pretty steep. But yeah, so regardless of age and ability, one can get those butterflies in their stomach. So question, you mentioned that at Burke, it was around age 17 where you worked on those mental skills. And I'll give a quick anecdote. I remember, again, being a passionate young skier in a bookstore and saw a book called Inside Skiing. And I bought the book. And then, unfortunately, you're terrific. You may have it on your bookshelf.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't look at it until I got home. And the book is about, obviously, the mental side of skiing. I thought it was about technique, and I was like, oh, great, this is good. And I may have been 10 years old. I was pretty young when I saw it. It didn't interest me. So at what age does working on these mental skills begin to come into play? And maybe reading Inside Skiing at age 10 was not appropriate, but there are other sorts of things that are age appropriate. So again, at what age do these mental skills come into play, and how do you go about introducing them at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, they come into play from kind of day one, because you can be 5 years old and still be scared about going down the hill. And when my kids, they went to Sugar Bowl Academy, which is the sort of Western version of Burke, and I spent time with the coaching staff, even the development, like the ski team, the Pee-wee program, whatever you want to call it, and working with them about how to incorporate simple mental tools into a group of 7-8-year-old crazy kids out on the hill, because they get scared, they get worried. What are people thinking of me? Am I going to be able to keep up? All those things. So you're not going to do formal mental training with them, but certainly coaches and instructors and parents, for that matter, can incorporate some of these tools into to help young skiers develop some of these capabilities mentally. Now, if in terms of the more serious, this idea of mental training, I work with kids down to about 11, and I find that that's sort of the cusp where if you have a kid who's super serious, like they want to be the best in the world, then they can see the interest. And that's why I've worked with some that young. But certainly high school age is a great time to develop some of these because they start to really make the connection between the power of the mind and what they're able to ski. And again, or snowboard, whether competitively or recreationally. I do want to mention one thing that's interesting about skiing that's quite unique as far as sports go, is that the great thing about skiing and snowboarding is that there's no clearly defined criterion of success. So tennis, over the net, and winning. Golf, in the cup, winning. In skiing, you make it from the top to the bottom in one piece, major victory. And you go out to any ski area and you'll see people who can barely ski and they're covered with snow and they are a mess, but they have the smile on their face massively because they made it to the bottom or they skied a blue or things like that. And so that's for me a really wonderful thing about skiing. The only sport I can think of that's not like that is like where there's a difference between the sport they do and the sport that's competitive. Is, I don't know, hiking. And I don't even think hiking's a sport. No offense to those hikers who think they're athletes. I mean, they are athletes, but yeah, I don't want to get into more trouble than I already am right now. Anyway, turn it back to you.
No, that's terrific. So obviously look, we learn the mental side of things the moment we come out of the womb in some way, right? Love, affection, all those sort of nurturing facets. Safety in the comfort of our parents' arms as opposed to danger, et cetera. So clearly we're learning those mental skills from inception. It's just a function of when do you incorporate them as a more structured curriculum, if you will, as opposed to naturally. Talking about parents and nurturing, what are the big mistakes that parents may make, even with the best of intentions? Like, what should parents be doing, or importantly, not doing, as they're helping their student athlete? I always say student athlete, but their athlete along in the pursuit of their goals.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just make it fun. Because it's a classic piece of research that found that between the ages of 8 and 13, 70% of kids drop out of sports. And number one reason, it's not fun. Second of all is be respectful of where kids are in the moment. So there might be a kid who's somewhat timid. And by the way, that was me. And so I was just a scared little skier. And my parents didn't push me. They didn't they didn't throw me into the deep end, as it were. And they were patient and loving and supportive and encouraging. And I got to the place, of course, where I became a good ski racer and where I no longer felt that. And so just really being patient and letting kids have experience and let them find their own way. I don't mean down the hill necessarily, but find the pace that they can go in. I think another great thing is if you can have your kids in a junior program, then it's not just skiing with your parents, it's skiing with my buddies and being with this really cool young coach. And so too often, especially in our achievements, crazy youth sports culture, it's the parents feel like I need to start like putting the gas pedal on my kids. Otherwise, they're not going to be the best ski racers in the world. Well, first of all, statistically, your kid's not going to be the best ski racer in the world. And those odds go down if you have no athletic genes. But even so, because I've worked with kids who had potential world-class capabilities, but they hated the sport because their parents pushed them too much. And so, Craig, we could go on for hours just talking about crazy sports parents because I've written a book on it. I work with them. I see it, being at races with my kids when they were younger. It's like, OMG. Yeah. How can you possibly do that? But and the challenge with what I do for a living is I have to practice what I preach. So which sort of forces me to keep my guardrails on as a ski racing parent. But that's certainly a big challenge for sure. But more than anything, it's like if you love skiing, your kids are probably going to love skiing if you simply do it just for that reason. for family. I mean, that was the way I grew up, just being a part of the family and being together and having adventures and being outside. And that's what I did with my kids. And we never had any illusions that they were going to become ski racers even until they decided they wanted to be. And they were for a while, and then they decided they didn't want to be, and then one went off to college and decided to be again. So it comes and goes, but it's a lifelong love and skill, and you hope they get good enough jobs, or you leave them enough money so they can afford it. But that's a whole other conversation.
Hopefully, I'll have someone from one of the major ski companies on at some point. We can talk about the affordability issue, but yeah, it's another conversation. Yeah, you talk about, allowing them to be fun, and you being a parent, I'm a parent of a ski racer who, I've seen the ebb and flow of their interest, of their enjoyment. I mean, enjoyment and interest don't necessarily coincide. Sometimes they are both correlated or causation, and sometimes they're completely independent of one another. And having been a parent of a ski racer, I'm curious as to how you did, because I know you are the expert when it comes to telling others how they should behave or what they should be thinking about, and then I know, as someone who grew up ski racing and can coach, standing on the side of the hill or at the finish area. I know what I'm supposed to and not supposed to say, and sometimes I cross the line. I'm definitely a quiet individual, but so how do you manage those impulses or urges, if you will?
Yeah, good question, Craig. And for one thing, I'll say that I'm a human being. And so I'm not that different from other parents in many ways. The challenge, of course, I have to practice what I preach, and I'm a little more aware. I would like to think, and I've always been very realistic with both my daughters. Is that I've never coached. I've never coached skiing. Do I know the sport pretty well technically? Yes, because I'm on the hill with world-class skiers. I'm at ski programs, race programs, and so on. So I know skiing. But I've always been pretty good at keeping within my boundaries. And the thing is, though, I mean, kids have a tremendous capacity to communicate messages to their parents. And so if there were times where I did cross the line, my daughters were pretty comfortable letting me know. And so it really, there's no set rules about what you can do and what you're allowed to do and what you should do. It's more just like, is your kid receptive to skiing? And there have been times when my daughters have been really receptive, and other times when it's like, talk to the hand, Dad. And so you just have to be tuned into your kid, and if they ask and you have something to say, great. But the challenge, though, especially on the race, on the competitive side, is when you start doing your kid's job or your coach's job, then you're not doing your job. And that's where it can get tricky, because I know some parents who are also coaches, and they coach their kids, and in some cases it works great. Some cases it works great for a while. Sometimes it never works. And so again, it's like, what messages are you getting from your kid about how they feel about you giving them feedback?
Yeah, I made it a point to never coach my son. That was the rule that I wanted to be the parent, albeit a very educated parent in the sport.
Yes.
So it was sometimes difficult, and I think by and large my son like that. I mean, that was the right choice. Although there were probably a couple times where he when he was active in terms of asking for questions or asking for feedback, like, what did I do wrong? Like, he wanted technical feedback, and probably because he felt he wasn't getting it from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And he wanted that, I think, which is a good sign from a kid's perspective, i.e. they want to improve and figure out what to do. One of the things that you said, I think, at one of the seminars that I saw you give once was, the best thing that you can do after a competition is give them a hug and ask them what they want to eat, basically.
Right. Yeah. And that really goes to expectations, because we're again a culture that's incredibly result driven, and I've seen parents go off on their 8 or 9 or 10-year-old kids, and how good you are at 10 years old is largely unpredictable of how you're going to be at 18 or 19 or 20, unless you're named Michaela Schifrin. And so being told your kid has potential. Well, there's an old saying from a basketball coach: all potential means is you haven't done a darn thing yet. And to be labeled with potential, that's assuming something that you have no idea about. Because think about it, the professional sports leagues, they spend billions upon billions of dollars trying to identify the best talent. And the classic example, Tom Brady, 199th in the NFL draft. And so, when I was 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, I had no potential. And yet I exceeded that potential. And then the burden of potential is also a cross to bear, because then you have to live up to something that you might not have. You might just be bigger than everybody else, or you've picked it up more quickly at first. But everything usually sort of levels out, and what's real comes about usually when you're 16 to 18. Yeah. And so it's for me. I say, like, I'm often asked, what should I say to my kid before a race? And the first thing I tell parents is that nothing you say will help your kid. It's like, go get them, have fun. No, nothing will matter. Nothing will help. But what you say can hurt. Like, go win. I know you can podium. I know you can beat Johnny. That's just kiss of death, because it places too much emphasis on results and things they can't control. So for me, it's like, I love you, have fun, and then we'll get lunch after. And then after, I love you, let's go get something to eat. What that communicates is, like, however you did, we love you, and it's not that important because we're just going to go have some lunch. And don't even get me started. One more thing. Don't even get me started on live timing. I just read an article on skiracing.com this morning that USSA is mandating no live timing for U14s and younger. I've been railing on live timing because I'm at races in the finish area. The parents are like, and then at lunch, every kid's on the phone. And you think about it, Craig, how many of those kids sitting around a table are happy with their result? Probably
even the winner of the run is usually not happy.
Right.
Yeah, sort of anecdotal. Was at a fifth race a couple of years ago, and I was the start ref, so I was up at the top of the hill, but my wife was collecting the bibs, and she remarked after, she's not a ski racer, but she, obviously having been around the sport for a while, remarked that there wasn't a single person that came through the finish line that was happy with their run.
Right.
Basically, everyone found fault with something that they did, even the winner.
Right. Yeah. And that actually is a kind of a deep psychological thing, because if you come down and say, "Oh, I totally blew that turn," and if you didn't do well, then you've got an excuse. So that protects you from having to admit, "I just suck." And so excuses. I mean, if I had 10 cents for every excuse I've heard in my athletic and professional career, I'd be a wealthy man today. But I always joke about it, even in live timing in the results, there's no excuse line. You finish 10th, or you finish 50th, or you're 12 seconds out, or whatever. The result speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's very, very objective.
Very objective.
And clear cut. Given that it's the off season, what should athletes and parents be focusing on now that would allow them to build mental strength or mental skills in the off season that'll hold them in good stead once the season rolls around?
Yeah, well, I think there's sort of an interesting disconnect between the physical side of ski racing and the mental side. So you wouldn't believe the number of calls I get 2 weeks before U16 Nationals. Can you get my kid ready? And Craig, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm no magician. Just like you wouldn't go to a conditioning coach 2 weeks before U16 Nationals and say, "Get my kid strong." And so I use the phrase mental training very deliberately. It's training. Because ski racers or skiers or snowboarders, they do mental stuff. They do things to motivate themselves, to be positive, to relax, to be focused. But mental stuff isn't mental training. Just like going into the gym and doing arm curls three times or every 3 weeks is not mental training. And so just like if you have got a young ski racer or a young competitive snowboarder, you don't have them start training in the late fall. You have them start training in the summer, and maybe they get on snow a couple of times if they're really serious. They do weight training, and so on. And so the same thing here with mental training. It takes time, and I use the metaphor of mental muscles. And I use that metaphor very deliberately because athletes can appreciate muscles, and that muscles can be weak, they can be strong, and they can be injured, but they need to be exercised. So there are a number of things one can do, especially this is more on the competitive side. If you're just a recreational skier, not just a recreational skier, but if you're a recreational skier and snowboarder, unless you're super committed to getting better, you're probably not going to do these things. But if you're super into it, you can definitely gain benefits. And the most powerful mental tool for snow sports is imagery. And this is not like magic. You watch the start area of every World Cup or an Olympics. What's everybody doing? Like that. They're rehearsing the run. Michaela Schifrin had a great quote before the 2016 Sochi Games. She was 18, favored to win the Olympic gold in slalom, and she was asked by an interviewer, "What's it like being in your first Olympics?" And she said, "Well, it might seem like my first Olympics to you, but I've raced this race hundreds of times in my mind." And so imagery is so powerful because it's not just picturing stuff in your head. It actually triggers motor programs, and it's a way to ingrain reps. Because the tough thing about skiing is, like, let's say you're a basketball player. You can literally play basketball every day. You can get reps upon reps upon reps of shooting the ball. But in ski racing, you can't ski every day. Even if you live in the mountains, you don't ski every day. So it's a way to, and you can't ski all day every day. And so it's a way to get reps of doing the right thing, whether it's technical, tactical, or mental. So imagery is the single most powerful thing that young skiers and snowboarders can do in the off season to get better.
So you'd suggest that they basically, think about a race course and imagine themselves skiing through the course,
right?
Or for others, the pipe, the super pipe, or the
right. Yeah, whatever discipline it is, for sure. And I usually recommend 3 to 5 times a week for like 15 minutes. The great thing about mental training, it doesn't take 4 or 5 hours a day like on snow training. And so you take 15 minutes and you pick a hill, you pick an event, you pick a race, and you imagine yourself going, and you imagine yourself skiing the way you want or working on things to improve.
Interesting. And so everything like, get forward. I want to start the turn earlier. I want to be higher. I want, like all of those skills that a coach may tell you, you can think about in the mental training.
Right. And also not just physical stuff, but mental stuff. Personal example. When the summer course that I took that exposed me to sports psychology, the final project was to imagine yourself doing some sport you wanted to improve on. So, of course, I chose ski racing. And I started doing imagery. I couldn't make it 2 gates in my head without hooking a tip. It was just like, hook. I couldn't stop myself from hooking tips. And this was my first realization that I learned later on once I studied it in school, is that imagery isn't just picturing stuff in your head. Because if you're picturing stuff in your head, you should be able to imagine anything you want. But it taps into something deeper. It taps into your unconscious. And my biggest challenge as a young ski racer was I didn't have confidence in myself. I basically knew I was going to screw up. And when I got in the gate, I would think, I'm going to blow it here. And I'd usually finish a couple of decent races of the year to get my points down, but I was super inconsistent. I DNF like 3/4 of my races. And so that summer and through the fall, I would, doing my imagery, I'd imagine myself running the course, and at full speed, I couldn't do it. Hook. Couldn't get my ski to not hook. So I had to slow it down to literally super slow, ABC super slow motion, if you remember that phrase, where I'd go frame by frame. It would start to hook, I'd pull it in. Start to hook, pull it in. It was a physical experience until I remember so clearly after about a month, I was able to run an entire course in slow motion without hooking a tip. And then I was able to speed up the video in my mind faster and faster until I could do an entire course at race speed. And then 2 runs. And over until I was, by the race season, I was able to see myself skiing really fast the way I wanted to. And that next year, quantum leap in my skiing. Again, made the bottom of the U.S. ski team, top 20 in the nation, top five of every slalom I was in, except U.S. Nationals at Lake Placid, where what did I do? I hooked a tip. But, stuff happens in ski racing.
Yes.
But for me, it was the psychological change was the big thing. Where the year before, when I got in the gate, I knew I was going to crash or blow it. That year, when I got in the gate, I not only knew I was going to finish, I knew I was going to win. And though I won a few times, I wasn't that kind of racer. I was more like a top 5, top 10 guy. But I finished 3/4 of my races. Like I said, the top 5 of every slalom I was in except one. And it was just like this quantum change in my psychology, which I attributed to my making that big leap.
It sounds like at 17, particularly a guy at 17, it takes a bit of maturity to recognize that the mental side of things need work. I mean, how do you address that? Because there are, like you said, there are kids who have, well, I don't want to use the word potential, but they have the capability, they have the physical talents or skills, but they may not have the maturity and or the mental skills down. So how do you get over that hump if you do?
Yeah, well, a big part of my mission in my career has been to get parents and coaches and programs and athletes to recognize that the mind needs to be trained just like the body does in terms of fitness and technique and tactics. And I've been doing this a long time, and it's still not there for sure. Most people reach out to me when they get stuck. And it's often where a coach will say, hey, this happened just recently with a young racer who I'm starting to work with, where it's like he sent me video, the kid, and he was a very good ski racer. He was a good ski racer. But these days, with equipment and good coaching, every kid's a good ski racer. It's like, are you a fast ski racer? And they still don't give style points in ski racing, which really kind of bothers me because I wish they did when I was racing. I probably would have been on the World Cup because I was a really good-looking skier, not here, but in terms of how I skied. Yeah. And but that doesn't count. All that matters is the clock, and so you have to learn to go fast. And so a lot of times parents reach out to me because they're just desperate. Their kid is just like the coaches don't know what to do. And so they figure it's mental. And so my job is to get them unstuck. But also just by, there is greater acceptance. Like most of the major programs around the country have some sort of person doing some sort of something. No one's nailed it yet. But somebody giving some talks, somebody being available, things like that. But it's a challenge because nobody says, oh, mental train or physical training, I'll get to that at some point. Nobody thinks like that, right? But psychology has some baggage. Like if you're seeing a sports psychologist or a mental coach, it's like, what are you, crazy or something? Well, pretty much every top athlete in almost every sport has or does work with some sort of sports psychologist or mental coach, and all the Olympic teams do, and the pro teams, and the university teams, etc.
You hit on an interesting point, which is my son went to a boarding school with an elite ski program to race FIS and basic, but I can't think of, and maybe he did and I just am not aware of it, but have mental training or skills training, and I think it would have benefited him had he done it, of course, but I guess you're right in that it's still not incorporated into the curriculum, the coaching curriculum, as much as it should be, and we're probably worse off because of it.
Well, I like to think so, but it's the evolution of a field that still struggles to gain traction, for sure.
Yeah. You talked about motivation. I always think of motivation really has to be intrinsic and sort of come from within. But how do you help an athlete who has lost some motivation? The parent comes to the great kid, no longer great skiing, not motivated, has lost his or her passion or whatever interest or whatever the case may be. What do you say? Is there mental coaching to come out of that, or is that perhaps pushing on a wet noodle, as they say?
No, it depends. There are two things I explore, and it's not uncommon for parents to send an athlete to me and say he's not motivated anymore. Two ways to look at that. One is that it's often not the case that they've lost their motivation. Like, I need to find it. Like, is it under my desk? Is it behind my bureau? It's somewhere around here. We just need to find it.
Yep.
It might be that there's something squashing it, and that's the way I like to think about it. Because skiing, snow sports, I think they're just really fun, really cool, and so it's not hard to be motivated. So it could be that something's squashing it. Maybe they're not having any success. Maybe they're having problems with teammates, with a coach. There are a lot of reasons why, or it could be pressure from a parent. That's often the case. And I've seen this before with athletes in a number of sports, including skiing, where I don't work with the kids. I work with the parents. And I get the parents to back off. Because kids have an amazing BS radar. They can sense whose needs are being met by their ski racing, for example. And if it's the parents, like one of the most dangerous words in parents is we. Like, we had a great race today. I didn't see you on the course. Anytime I hear that, it's like red flags, sirens going off, red lights spinning around.
Yeah.
And I found that if I can get parents to back off in that situation, kids find the love and the passion and the motivation again, because it's a cool sport. At the same time, so a lot of that is just really doing some deep exploring to see what's the motivators. Because not every kid ski races or skis for to be the best. They do it because they like being outdoors. They like hanging out with their buds. They know it's a great escape from sitting from a screen, whatever it might be. At the same time, that sometimes kids' passions just change. So, and this happened with both my daughters, in fact, where they were on their way they were both at Sugar Bowl Academy, and they were going to follow in my footsteps and all that kind of wonderful stuff. And then at one point they just said, you know what? I don't want it that bad. I want to have a more robust academic high school experience. And did that bother me a little? Yeah, because I got, going to Burke and having a career in the sport for a long time, that was formative in who I've become. And also life here where I live is a little too easy, and ski racing's hard. I think it's harder than soccer or lacrosse or team sports, and it's because the weather, the conditions, it's unforgiving. It's brutal. It's a brutal. I wrote an article about this years ago. It's a brutal sport,
yeah.
And we live in a brutal world. So I want my kids toughened up, in the developed country sort of sense. I want my kids to suffer in a developmentally healthy, appropriate sort of way. Anyway, but ultimately they have to find their own way, their own road. And we achieved our main goals was they become great skiers. And as I said before, after leaving Sugar Bowl Academy after 9th grade, my daughter's in college, and she's racing in college now. And she's having so much fun, and it brings tears to my eyes. Because she always loved it, but she just didn't love it quite enough to want to make that kind of choice, to give up sort of a lot of the normal things that you do if you go to a ski academy. Your son went to, I'm not gonna name names, but I assume I know which one it is, one of the top 3 back east, and a school like that, you can get the more traditional experience while also being able to pursue high-level ski racing.
Yeah, and interesting, he made the decision. At first, we toured one of the ski academies. He was like, "Can you just leave me here?" This was back in 7th grade, and then a year goes by. 8th grade at middle school. I keep kind of thinking, he's like, "No, I don't want to do that." Of course, then the pandemic hit. Sort of rewrote everything, and as a result, we moved to the country. He was on he went to a high school that had a ski team, and he got to ski a couple days a week plus the weekends, and of course, but he did well performance wise locally, and he basically said, hey, I do want to compete at a higher level. I want to pursue it again, and the important thing that he said was, I don't know if I'll always be in love with the sport, or if I get injured, I don't want to have to switch schools. Like, I want something that would tide him over, regardless of where skiing fit into the picture. And so, from that perspective, he was mature in terms of choosing what he wanted, and I thank him for that. He then, interestingly, fell out of love well, he basically said he wasn't having a good time his senior year. A slew of DNFs at FIS races, and he basically told me he wasn't happy. And so you mentioned brought some tears. There he brought some tears to my eyes because don't want a child to have that experience. And then he's now racing again in college. With a very good, competitive team, and he's having a fun time. Like he enjoys his, and once again, tears to my eyes for the other reason. Skiing can be brutal on the parents as well.
Yeah, ski racing is really, really tough for parents because, first of all, they have very little familiarity with the sport unless you come from the sport.
Yeah.
And initially enough, I've worked with a couple of kids whose parents were U.S. ski team athletes. And I've worked with a number of athletes who in other sports where their parents were world class in their sport. They're the best parents. They're the best parents because they know how difficult it is and they know how unlikely it is. And then it's like you just do your thing. It's your thing, whatever. I'm just here to support you.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude to have no matter what you know about being a ski racing or sport parent.
Aside from falling out of love with the sport, there are other setbacks that one can experience in skiing or any, frankly, sport. Whether it's injuries or obviously there's performance-related issues, i.e., a string of DNFs in our sport or something similar. How do you address those sorts of challenges or hurdles when it comes to helping the athlete get back on course?
Yeah, this is an example of like training for life, because life has setbacks, life has ups and downs, life has failures, life has struggles, and so I think of it as like you need to learn to deal with it. And the psychology term is resilience, which is an essential thing in life because life is full of struggles. And so if you don't experience them when you're younger, you're not going to know how to deal with them when you're older. And I think that's a challenge these days with a lot of kids because parents are the snowplow parent or the helicopter parent or whatever metaphor you want to use. But in that case, it's like injury. I've written 2 books on the psychology of injury, and it's an area that I work with a lot with athletes. And I've seen athletes become better athletes and regain their love of their sport because of a serious injury, like an ACL, because it really tests you. Because I've worked with some athletes where they go, I'll get back. I'm in no hurry. I'm not that into it. It's like an excuse, but a good excuse. It's like a reason why I can get off the train because I don't really want to be on the train. Or I can go like, you know what, I'm jonesing for it, so I'm going to do anything I can to get back. And the great thing about injuries these days, athletes come back from major injuries like ACLs, and physically, performance-wise, incredibly successful. And so with injuries, oh my gosh, I mean, I had one athlete come to me this winter. He had DNF'd in 10 out of the last 11 races. Talk about the world not sending very supportive messages to you.
Yeah.
And so again, it goes to tapping into, why are you doing this? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And then it's detective work, where it's like what, there's a pattern here. One of my favorite sayings is first time is an accident, second time is a coincidence, third time is a pattern. So if something happens 3 or more times, there's something going on. It's just not the Almighty God's looking unkindly at you. And so looking to see what's happening mentally. Often, even before I get to the mental side, I'll start breaking it down where, again, I don't know technique and tactics and equipment specifically, but I'll ask, how's your setup? Are you on the right skis? What's with the boots? How's your alignment? What's going on technically? Do you have any injuries? Whatever it might be. And uncover what those obstacles are holding them back. And then hopefully they'll get over it. And if not, like this one, we started working together, I think in February after a really tough start. And he went on and finished like 7 races in a row and had some good starts. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. It's more that, the chances that I had anything to do with it, maybe a little bit, but more than anything, I probably just gave him hope. And you got to have hope. And after 10 DNFs and 11 races, not a lot of hope going on. Right. But also statistically, you can flip 10 tails in a row. But what's the odds of the next flip? 50-50. Mm-hmm. And so sooner or later he was going to finish. And also I sort of spin it in terms of it's actually kind of a good sign. It can be a good sign if you're DNFing a lot. Because you can easily finish a slalom course or a GS course or whatever. Right. You just go slow. So what I see with many young racers who are growing into themselves is that they find a new gear, but their mind and their bodies just aren't used to going that fast. So it's like, whoa, wait, let me catch up. And it takes 10 DNFs to finally catch up. And he did. And he had finished the season amazingly strong. But it takes a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, a lot of perspective. And that's where I'm not looking for business here, Craig, but that's a lot of times where I provide what I provide, because a coach only knows so much about that side of things. Parents, I can speak for myself. I send my kids the greatest messages. Wrong messenger. And so coming from me though, it's like, yeah, this guy gets me. He knows what it's like. Yeah, maybe he's right. And once you provide perspective, then it's like, oh, it's not so bad. And then you relax and you trust a little bit and you have hope. And then oftentimes it comes together.
Yeah, the neutral third party, the non-parent providing the feedback is probably worth the weight in gold. You talked about call it the brutality of the sport. And you also mentioned that you coach business professionals or others that are out, I would say outside of sport traditionally. Yeah. For those that are listening, I think I know it intrinsically based on my own experience, but what do you hope that the young athletes carry forward from racing, from competition, into life?
Oh my gosh! What do we have? I don't know if we have enough time.
We have another hour.
Yeah. But some of the basics: passion, motivation, confidence, the ability to handle stress, resilience, discipline, commitment, the ability to handle your emotions, learn how to deal with failures, setting goals, failing to achieve goals, persistence, perseverance.
Yeah.
Everything. It's life.
One of the things that I meant to touch on a moment ago, but off season, kids are hopefully engaged in other sports activities, right? They're maybe playing, some other either a team sport or individual sport. To the extent that they can, aside from enjoying it and having a good time, what are their mental skills that they can learn or train by participating in those other sports that are transferable to skiing?
Yeah. On the mental side, it's all transferable. Personal experience. When I was at Burke, I was, I think, 15 or 16. I am really timid, shy, introverted, no aggressiveness at all. So my coaches had me train as a soccer goalie, and a couple of guys had motocross bikes. And one of the coaches set up a course on his property outside of East Burke, and I rode motocross. So with soccer, I learned to fall. Because obviously soccer, you're falling on the soccer goalie, you fall a lot. And motocross, you have this big bike between your legs and you're going over jumps, and it's like, you got to commit. And that also was a very formative experience in terms of being able to assert myself and be more aggressive. Because again, I could ski really nicely, but I wasn't aggressive enough. And the thing about ski racing in so many aspects of life, and when I say aggressive, I don't mean like you don't want to go around attacking people or being mean to people. What I really mean is being assertive, imposing your will. I talk about this with racers all the time. When you're in the gate, you're actually competing against 4 competitors. Now, they're all the people in the race you're racing against, but before that, there are 4 other opponents, and that's the snow conditions, the course set, the terrain and the weather. And I jokingly but sort of seriously say this, is that the morning of a race, those four opponents get together and have a meeting. And they say, what can we do to F this guy up? And so the course says, man, I've got an offset hairpin. It's going to screw him up. And the snow conditions say, man, I've got an ice patch on the pitch. And the terrain says that transition is just going to get them in the back seat. And the weather says, I'm going to throw in a little fog and a little snow. And so teaching them to learn how to deal with all the stuff that life throws at them. And you can learn that in soccer and tennis and rock climbing, in any sport. You can learn it in dance. You can learn it in chess. Because, again, it's all more or less the same mental stuff. It's just a matter of where you apply it. And yes, a chessboard, chess is incredibly hard, but there's no like cold weather in a chess match. And that's the amazing thing about ski racing, is that the conditions are more brutal than almost every other sport out there. And one could say cross-country skiing is more brutal, but they're not going that fast. Although they do go fast when they go downhill. But anyway, so there are obviously some very tough other sports. But I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and ski racing is one of the toughest, that's for sure, in terms of all the adversity it throws at you.
Yeah, and the lack of uniformity, right? There's no defined playing field. It's not right. 100 feet by 50 feet, but the hoop is 10 feet off the floor. Like there's none of that is standardized.
Yeah, I say it's not bowling.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. Last thing, in terms of where you talked about your writings, where can listeners learn more about your work and find your books that you mentioned and articles?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I've got a bunch of books on Amazon. I have a website, of course, drjimtaylor.com, drjimtaylor.com. And this is, Craig, having this conversation is not about selling stuff. Yeah. About 95% of everything I've ever written is on my website for free. I have a blog. I have a ski racing blog. I have a sports blog, a parenting blog. I'm also, of course, they have this thing called social media. You might have heard of it. And so I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Not a TikTok guy. But and X, yep. Formerly known as.
Right.
Anyway, I post on there a lot, and so more than anything is just if I can help in any way, just informally. You have a question, I always respond to my emails. People are always amazed that I respond to people's emails. It's like I just appreciate that people appreciate me, and so I want to express that appreciation. So there's a lot of great information out there, and so I'm happy to share it.
Terrific. Glad to hear that. Yes, the little things in life in terms of appreciation, it goes a long way.
Indeed it does.
Jim, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. Love it. And I wish I could say, let's go rip some fresh corduroy, but it's not that time of year.
Well, next time, winter's far closer than we always think it is, right?
Yes.
Very good.
So next time I'm out in the Truckee area, definitely look you up. Well, thanks again, Jim. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Great talking to you. One of the most enjoyable things I like to do is to talk shop with other people passionate about what I am. So you're one of those people.
Terrific. All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. I thought the episode with Dr. Jim was fantastic. I know I've got a few action items for myself this summer. I really think it'd be beneficial for everybody to use imagery this summer to improve your skiing. While I'm not ski racing anymore, I'm going to work on it and try and perfect my helis. I've always wanted to be able to pull a heli off of a jump, and so that's what I'm going to work on this summer in my mind. I also thought it's so important, and Jim highlighted it so well, that skiing builds life skills that help beyond skiing. The resiliency, the toughness that ski racing and other winter competitive sports builds is super helpful, and I can see that in my own son and frankly with my own life. And so, think that everyone should take that away as one of the lessons from today's episode. And finally, I think it's really important that ski programs and parents emphasize the mental side of sport and the training it requires. I know it's often shrugged aside or pushed aside as far as voodoo science or some other something lesser than, but it really does make a difference. You see all the top athletes do it in just about every sport, and it's something that children should begin to work on at an early age so they get in the habit of doing it. So I think it's something that programs should work on and teach their student athletes on how to perform mental skills training and imagery, and parents should be encouraging as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Fresh Corduroy. Please write me with any episode suggestions at freshcorduroypodcast@gmail.com. That's freshcorduroypodcast@gmail.com. Music is by Eric Zolan from his album Calder's Universe, which can be found on Spotify. Until next time, see you soon.